Good morning. Welcome to our last chapter in Luke. And I say good morning because following the story, this last part of the story, the ending of the story, is quite specific on time and like dates. And so we're on Sunday morning. Friday, as the story recounts, Friday Jesus was crucified in a brutal, gruesome display for the public to see. The whole world represented was able to witness and see the death verified by Roman officers whose job was to verify death. Verified he died. No pulse, no heartbeat, frankly, no blood left in the body. The body was an empty corpse. The people who opposed Jesus felt this was a victory. They felt justified. They felt deemed correct in what they'd said all along, that he is not the Messiah. He is not the one he claimed to be, and his death proves it. Now, to further make sure that their claims would be substantiated, they made sure to place him in an untouched tomb that had never been used before, with a huge, huge boulder of a stone put over the entrance. Why? Because the people opposed knew the prophecies, and the prophecies all said that the Messiah would rise again. So they got to make sure that this would not happen. So they posted guards in front of the tomb. And they went to great lengths to make sure that no one was going to misunderstand something that isn't true after all. So they made sure that if it's going to happen, which they didn't think it would, by golly, it's going to take a miracle. So they went to all these lengths Friday. Saturday was their Sabbath day, the day of rest. So no one went back on Saturday because it was a day of rest. But on Sunday morning, we pick up with today's story. Because remember, the body hadn't been embalmed yet. And that was a part of their tradition, was to take spices and certain cloths and things to prepare the body for its final burial. Now, they didn't know how they were going to get in because, again, this thing is sealed. Maybe the people that would be approaching would hope that they could bribe someone to see if they could get some help. But it was a long shot, put it that way. It was a long shot. They went hoping that maybe there was a way to get in, and maybe if they figured out how they're going to get in, then they could prepare the body. But this is where we pick up today. Let's start reading our last chapter of Luke, Luke 24. It's a sad day for anyone claiming to be a Jesus follower, because the one who we believed in, the unthinkable had happened. He died. They did not think that would ever happen. It was impossible. They'd seen him perform miracles. How could he possibly allow death to overcome him, let alone torture? But he did, which made everyone doubt, which made everyone think maybe he wasn't who he said he was. And so no one's looking over the horizon to see what's going to happen. Everyone's in their homes. They're in hiding places. They're cowering, wondering what their fate would be next for having been with him for so long. What would happen to them next? That was their chief concern right now as we pick up our story on Sunday morning. Very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, carrying the spices that they had prepared. When they found the stone rolled away from the entrance, they went in. But they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus, and they did not know what to think. Suddenly, two men in shining white clothes stood beside them. The women were afraid and bowed to the ground. But the men said, "Why are you looking in the place of the dead for someone who is alive? Jesus isn't here. He has been raised from death. Remember that while he was still in Galilee, he told you, the Son of Man will be handed over to sinners who will nail him to a cross. But 3 days later, he will rise to life." Then they remembered what Jesus had said. Pause a moment. They remembered. Meaning it was an aha moment, meaning they weren't expecting this, meaning they had already dismissed previous things that Jesus said as probably not true, so they were written off, moving forward, and suddenly they remembered, wait a minute, he did say that this was going to happen, causing them in a moment right now to begin to wonder, what's going on? Let's keep reading. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and some other women were the ones who had gone to the tomb. When they returned, they told the 11 apostles and the others what had happened. The apostles thought it was all nonsense, and they would not believe. But Peter ran to the tomb, and when he stooped down and looked in, he saw only the burial clothes. Then he returned, wondering what had happened. Pause again a second. You got to read between the lines here and pick up on some things that were going on. When Jesus recruited people to his ministry, he was very purposeful in how he did it, who he recruited, and what he did. And Jesus recruited women. Now you got to understand something. In this time of history, all societies, every society on the earth treated women in second place and men in first place. Probably because the men had the power, so to speak, the strongest rule, so to speak. You either do this or, sorry, too bad so sad. So in this survival of the fittest atmosphere, in this almost barbaric, perhaps, way of doing life, that was just the way it was. Jesus changed that. Jesus, the first person to point out that men and women were both created in God's image, both created to be equal, pointed this out by actions, by the way he did things. So other teachers, when they would teach students, only taught men students. So to further this, Jesus is a teacher, meaning he said, hey, I'm putting women in, which was never heard of. You never had women students. So for the guys, the reason I'm saying this, for the guys, the disciples, you got to understand there was tension. The women went to the tomb, the women come back and report, and they're like, okay, guys, it's the girls back again. They're talking. Look, Jesus is gone. Okay, so the whole charade's over, okay? Go back to the way it was before. Is back in their mind thinking. You got to understand that you're going to revert back to what you were before when you think that it's all over. So the men doubted it. They didn't believe women at first. Peter had to go see for himself. Let's keep reading. That same day, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to the village of Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they were talking and thinking about what had happened, Jesus came near and started walking along beside them. But they did not know who he was. Jesus asked them, "What were you talking about as you walked along?" The 2 of them stood there looking sad and gloomy. Then the one named Cleopas asked Jesus, "Are you the only person from Jerusalem who didn't know what was happening there these last few days?" "What do you mean?" Jesus asked. They answered, "Those things that happened to Jesus from Nazareth. By what he did and said, he showed that he was a powerful prophet who pleased God and all the people. Then the chief priests and our leaders had him arrested and sentenced him to die on a cross. We had hoped that he would be the one to set Israel free. But it has already been 3 days since all this happened." Now pause a second. Remember, the prophecies foretold that 3 days later, Jesus would rise from the dead. So these guys were already going, we were kind of hoping maybe he could be the one, but 3 days are gone, so we're really bummed out. He must have just been a good guy and a good prophet. Keep reading. Some women in our group surprised us. They had gone to the tomb early in the morning, but did not find the body of Jesus. They came back saying that they had seen a vision of angels who told them that he is alive. So some men from our group went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see Jesus either. Then Jesus asked the 2 disciples, "Why can't you understand? How can you be so slow to believe all that the prophets said? Didn't you know that the Messiah would have to suffer before he was given his glory?" Jesus then explained everything written about himself in the scriptures, beginning with the law of Moses and the book of the prophets. When the 2 of them came near the village where they were going, Jesus seemed to be going farther. They begged him, "Stay with us. It's already late and the sun is going down." So Jesus went into the house to stay with them. After Jesus sat down to eat, he took some bread. He blessed it and broke it. Then he gave it to them. Pause a minute. Now, what you just read, Jesus sat down to eat. He took some bread. He blessed it, broke it, gave it to him. You got to picture this in your mind. This is an aha moment. This is a wink moment where Jesus, I'm sure this is what happened. He repeated, mimicked, replayed the exact way it was done when it was the Last Supper and they were just together in a very private intimate setting. No one else would know these kinds of details unless you had been there. He did that. Now let's read on. At once, they knew who he was, but he disappeared. They said to each other, when he talked with us along the road and explained the scriptures to us, didn't it warm our hearts? So they got right up and returned to Jerusalem. The 2 disciples found the 11 apostles, and the others gathered together. And they learned from the group that the Lord was really alive and had appeared to Peter. Then the disciples from Emmaus told what had happened on the road and how they knew he was the Lord when he broke the bread. While Jesus' disciples were talking about what had happened, Jesus appeared and greeted them. They were frightened and terrified because they thought they were seeing a ghost. But Jesus said, "Why are you so frightened? Why do you doubt? Look at my hands and my feet and see who I am. Touch me and find out for yourselves. Ghosts don't have flesh and bones, as you see I have." After Jesus said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. The disciples were so glad and amazed that they could not believe it. Jesus then asked them, "Do you have something to eat?" They gave him a piece of baked fish. He took it and ate it as they watched. Pause again. Okay, now. There's proof going on here. Jesus is like, I know this is hard to believe. And I know I appeared on the road to Emmaus. And I know that it was hard to recognize. But guys, I'm doing all this on purpose because you're going to freak out. So here he is. Like this time, it's like 100% they know exactly by looking at him. You look like Jesus. He's got the holes to prove it. Look at my hands, my feet. And to take it one step further, he sits down and eats some fish with them. Now, why is this significant? Because when Jesus leaves this next time, there's going to be no food left on a plate. Adding further evidence for the disciples to question and wonder, okay, were we hallucinating all this? Well, hallucinations don't leave fish. Hallucinations don't leave no scrap of food left on a plate. Hallucinations can't make food disappear. So this is amazing because this is what one more way of Jesus proving you're seeing this for real. This isn't weird and fake. No one would go on in their life to risk death for a fake vision, for a fake idea. Every one of the people who would take Jesus' name forward from this point on would face execution, or at least the risk of it. Because there were still believers, or not believers, there were still people who did not want to believe that he is who he said he was. No one's going to risk their life for a possibility, for a 90% chance. The only way you're going to risk your life for something is if it's 100% true, especially if you're James, the brother of Jesus. Who better to know Jesus than James? Who better to know their own brother? And yet James would go on to die when challenged, facing an executioner that said, okay, look, just tell us the truth. Jesus wasn't really the Son of God, right? And James goes, sorry, guys, I know what you're trying to get me to say, but he is who he said he was. Go ahead and kill me because it's true. Let's read on. Jesus said to them, while I was still with you, I told you that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the book of the prophets, and in the Psalms had to happen. Then he helped them understand the scriptures. He told them, the scriptures say that the Messiah must suffer. Then 3 days later, he will rise from death. They also say that all people of every nation must be told in my name to turn to God in order to be forgiven. So, beginning in Jerusalem, you must tell everything that has happened. I will send you the one my Father has promised, but you must stay in the city until you are given power from heaven. Jesus led his disciples out to Bethany, where he raised his hands and blessed them. As he was doing this, he left and was taken up to heaven. After his disciples had worshipped him, they returned to Jerusalem and were very happy. They spent their time in the temple praising God. That completes our study of the book of Luke. How amazing it is to go through the entire life of Jesus as you've done with me. What a greater understanding we have of Jesus' intent, of his purpose, and most of all, what he wanted us to do. Thank you for joining me.